Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of our sermon series, Asking for a Friend. We have Barb and Scott Abrams here, along with my wife, Liz, and we're excited to hear from them. And before we do that, we just want to get to know them really quick. So first, who made the first move?
Scott.
Yeah. I just want to see what she said. I just want to make sure that
You share the story. How'd you guys meet?
We worked at a Christian camp, and we were both camp counselors. So that's where we met.
that's the boring version.
What's the exciting version?
The exciting version is I saw her and I don't necessarily recommend, I've told you this before, I don't necessarily recommend love at first sight, but she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. And I walked right up to her and I said, "Hi, my name's Scott Abrams." It was not the best move, but.
What did you say to him?
I said, "I know who you are."
And she walked away. She just walked away.
Great. And so you met at camp. How did you guys form your relationship?
We were friends first, right? I mean, we were friends for a long time. Not for my lack of wanting it to be more. I was always trying to take it to the next level, but.
I just wanted to be friends until he got over his mullet. And no.
7 years. Yeah.
So the moral of the story is if you're persistent, even if you have a mullet,
It's like water on a rock.
yeah, just keep.
Wears you down.
And maybe cut the mullet.
Yeah, that's the moral of the story.
Lose the tank tops.
Oh,
That's great. And you guys how long have you been married?
I'm gonna let you answer that one.
22 years.
Wow. I don't know.
She
if
let me answer.
I don't
She
know if that's
wasn't quite
because she
sure.
didn't know.
She wasn't entirely
Forget
sure.
what year.
Yeah, she has
Yeah,
us do the
right.
math. Yeah.
22 years. And you have 2 kids.
Jake and Maggie.
And what are their ages?
Jake is 20. Maggie's 19.
Okay. Did you get that right last time?
I think I had to think about it for a second.
In focus.
Yeah.
Hone in on it. Okay. What was your first dance at your wedding?
We didn't have a dance.
You didn't have a dance?
We got
We-
married at 11 o'clock in the morning.
We're both pastors' kids. We
Had
did
a
not dance.
brunch.
No, there was no dancing.
At brunch?
We had a brunch,
It was-
and then we left.
It was not brunch, but there was no dancing.
Okay. Well, dang. What's another question then? Like a relationship question.
You're putting me on
What's the worst gift you've
great
ever given each other? What's the worst gift you've ever received and the worst gift that you've ever received from the other person?
I don't think.
Non-stick pan.
Yeah, but
for
nonstick
you.
pan. I just got a nonstick pan for my birthday. So
The
yeah.
most recent.
But it's what I asked for. So I mean, I think I gave you like I came home once. It wasn't even a birthday. I just said, "Oh, I got you something." And she was expecting something fun. I think it was like a vacuum or something. Yeah, it was like. I mean,
It's like avoid things with cords.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I got a wetsuit one year.
oh, it was a good gift. It was a good gift.
Did you ask for it?
No.
No, but it was a good gift. It was thoughtful.
I don't think she liked the gift.
I also got a
slalom
water
ski?
ski, a
Yeah,
slalom
water ski.
ski, but it was super wide. Like
Like beginner.
We were beginners. Called it Big Bertha.
it was like for people who aren't really very good.
Hope there's no
So-
Berthas watching.
That was. He's had some doozies. The vacuum cleaner was probably the worst thing.
I would say
Good to know.
I want a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. I'm like,
But I don't want it as a
if
gift.
You want one.
I don't want one as a
specific-
gift.
You want a specific kind, right?
No, yeah.
he does, but I think it's just you'd rather have something else for a special occasion.
Sure.
You'd rather just get that because you need it.
Right.
hmm
We need a new vacuum. Let's go to the store.
Yeah.
That's very true.
He's learned. He doesn't do that anymore.
My mom always shares that the worst present she received was for Mother's Day, and my dad walked up with a lawnmower, and she was like, "Thank you. I'd probably never use that." And so Dad said we needed more. So,
I don't think I have a bad gift. You've always given me exactly what I wanted, what I tell you to get me. So good job.
It's a
Keep
good way
doing
to
that.
do it.
Good. All right. Well, let's jump into the meat of the story here. So, just for the sake of anyone that hasn't listened to your story, will you just kind of share really quick your
Yeah,
history?
I'll give the quick version, and I'll try to talk slower.
yeah.
Barb says I sound really dumb when I talk slow.
It's for Logan.
So I'll try to talk slower though. Quick version is grew up in a Christian home, but then eventually discovered opioid pain pills through, I guess, a surgery I had in medical school. And then that was, everybody's got their own struggle, but that was that's been my most obvious life struggle was with addiction. And so that was that was medical school when I had surgery at the end of medical school. And that kind of kicked off a slow progress towards opiate addiction. And it's just spiraled over the years. 2014, wheels just came off. We'd been through it a couple times. I won't go into the whole story, but yeah, I mean, I'd been hiding it. Barb had no idea it was coming. And I lost my job, had to go to treatment. Our marriage was an absolute disaster. The kind of betrayal, the lying, the hiding, the stealing, all of that our life was just an absolute disaster. This was 2014.
Awesome. Not awesome.
Not awesome.
Just don't know what to say in that
story.
moment. Yeah. And so the reason why we want to bring you on, Barb, is because there are obviously a lot in that story. There's lies, secrets. Well, secrets are lies, but just a lot of things that you went through. The two of you went through and are still together. And that's such an encouragement for people who are single, maybe engaged or married, who are looking forward to marriage, is the understanding that it's not always rainbows and butterflies. Sometimes it's really, really hard. And you have that unique perspective where you experience the really, really hard. Both of you, right? Because you had to work on your relationship together. So we just wanted to hear from you tonight and just kind of see what are some of the things that God did in your life, and what is he continuing to do as well. So thank you so much for being willing to share today. I know you did not want to, but this is a good compromise. Do it over a video with no one else in the room.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Maybe one day we'll get it live. Mother's Day speaker in the future.
I don't know.
Scott has gone to treatment 3 times now. And this is on the 3rd time. And now you are in this position where you don't know what to do. So what's going through your head in those moments?
I was planning on leaving.
Or kicking me out.
Kicking him
Yeah.
out. Just leaving the marriage though. But we had 2 kids. And I talked to a couple of friends who'd been through divorce and asked them, would you do it again? Hoping that they would say, oh yes, absolutely. I'm so much happier now. And both of them said, no, I wouldn't put my kids through that again. So I was faced with, am I going to follow what I really want to do and be done with this? Or am I going to try and figure out a way to move forward and keep our family together?
And it wasn't just the idea of dealing with that. It was, it'd been 3 times. Like, this is
Right.
just going to keep happening. Am I going to subject myself to that, right? Or
Right.
how do I make boundaries? How do I?
Yeah. And that took, it's taken years to start rebuilding trust. And there are some things the trust probably never fully comes back. But through it all, I've learned who to trust, and that's God. And I do trust Scott, but that's because of the changes he's made in his life. And it had to be more than just, I'm never going to do this again. I had to see it daily for years and years.
I had said the first 2 times around, I swear I'd never do this again. I promise. I swear to heaven and earth, but didn't make any changes in my life. And of course, then relapsed. And so the 3rd time, I knew I couldn't say that. I knew I just had to live it. I just had to be different for a long time.
Yeah. And forgiveness is such a process. It's not just saying, okay, I forgive you and, moving on. We had to set some serious boundaries. We're very open with each other now, where maybe we weren't as open before, but I think we talked about this before. I have access to his phone, his computer. I can look at anything I want. I don't usually, but if I say, let me see your phone, it's not like, no, you can't see my phone. He's very open about everything. If anything comes up that I think is a red flag, if I bring it up, he's not defensive, because that would be another big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, things were not good for a very long time after he came home. And I was laying in bed one night with my daughter, and she started crying, and she said, "Mom, when are you going to forgive Dad?" And I realized then that that was something that I really needed to work on. And I didn't want to become bitter. So honestly, in the beginning, forgiving him was kind of a selfish thing. It was self-preservation.
Sure.
And I didn't want my kids to see me become a bitter person. And, you know, if I'm going to tell them how important my Christian faith is, I have to live it in front of them. I can't just say it. So yeah, it was a long process, but read a lot of books, spent a lot of time reading through the Psalms. And, you know, the Bible promises if you draw near to God, he will draw near to you. And so that's what I did. So.
I remember you talking about how that forgiveness is a process, and I don't remember if you said it exactly this way, but the idea was, I've done it, but I have to keep doing it because I keep taking it back, right? And something happens, there's an emotion that comes up or a situation where you're reminded and the hurt is there again, and now I have to do it all over again. It's not like a once and done thing. It is a process.
And, you know, I went to see a counselor. It's healthy to set boundaries. He knows if this happens again.
Well, I don't remember. We've had that
remember?
Conversation. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, you know, there are consequences for your actions, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, because if you don't remember past lessons, you're just going to repeat the same mistakes over and over. So, you know, you go through the process. And one of the books I read is called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's Suzanne Eller. She's written several books, and this one is on forgiveness. And one of the quotes in that book is forgiveness is surrender. It's offering up resentment. It's giving up the desire to punish. It's letting go of anger. It's getting out of the debt collection business. And surrender to God is an active form of spiritual warfare because you are no longer battling alone. And so I realized forgiveness for me was God doing it through me. I couldn't do it on my own, but he can make those changes in your heart if you're willing to let him.
So do you feel like Scott waking up in the morning and devotionals and his blog, his books, all these things, do you think that this might be a weird question, but do you think that they are helping you forgive him? Or do you think that they are just a really great way for you to see him working at it and continuing to strive forward with his addiction?
Probably the second thing, because I would be called to forgive him whether he had changed or not.
Yeah.
It would have been probably a much harder, longer process, continual, you know, if he was still living in that kind of life. But forgiveness is honestly more about the person doing the forgiving than the person who you are forgiving. You know, it's changing your own heart.
I think that's a great point about forgiveness. It's liberating to the oppressed. It's not necessarily about if the person deserves it or not, because that actually keeps you bound if you aren't able to at least declare forgiveness and then let the Lord do the work. That does change your heart in your own life, not necessarily in seeing what they're, you know, letting them prove anything to you. That comes with, you know, work and time, but forgiveness is the decision.
Yeah. And I can't control what he does or doesn't do, but I am called to forgive. So it's not easy though. I mean, there are times you want to bring things up and throw it back in his face. And I did for a while. I think I'm pretty good about not doing that anymore.
You are.
Every once in a while, I'll just say, I like you better now. You're not such a
Just to
jerk.
remind me.
Can't imagine why.
As being on this side of it, as you know, kind of the perpetrator in this case of the wrong, of the hurt. I was the person who did the hurting. think we're coming out, and this is common. I hear this all the time from other people that are in a similar situation. You know, you go to treatment, you clean up your life, and you want things to go back to normal right now, and you don't understand. And because maybe early on you'll feel like I need to forgive you, and I say the words, and then we want things to go back to normal, right? Like I'm a day out of treatment, I want life to go back to normal, and the understanding on my side was really slow to come that this takes time, and I did not get that. And that I had to live differently for a long time for her to see that. And it wasn't about proving to her that things are different. It was about being different. I'm abandoning my life and following Christ. That is the plan. And I had it out with God too. I said, God, I'll do this if you give me my life back, if you give me my family back. And then God's like, nope, that's not the deal. You be different and you change your life to follow me, not to follow your idea of what life should be. And I just had to do that and then eventually. But the trust thing, I think you alluded to that. The trust thing is not attached to the forgiveness, right? They're not the same.
No.
I mean, I can loan my car to you 10 times and you wreck it 10 times. You know, I can forgive you without giving you the keys back. You know, I can say, no, I'm never giving you the keys again, but you're forgiven, you know? Yeah. And I didn't understand that. I wanted everything to be back to normal. And I hear that a lot now with other guys is, oh, my wife, wants to know where I'm at or what I'm doing or wants to look at my phone. I'm like, that's the deal. I mean, you're married. I mean, you are open with each other and you learn to trust each other and you have to build that trust. And it can be broken like that, but it takes a long time to build.
So one of the tips for young people who are maybe getting into marriage is that open communication, open accountability kind of
From
stuff.
the start.
Right.
Don't wait until you go through something horrible
Yeah.
to start it. That's just
Yeah,
from the start.
and that was my, I don't even know how to say it. That was my MO. I mean, I don't have to tell her. I just do what I want to do. And it doesn't, and I remember you saying afterward, saying later, you don't think how your decisions affect me. And this isn't just about drugs. This is about
Everything.
my way of living. I just do what I want to do. And later it's like, oh, that affected you in some negative manner. And that was a light bulb moment for me. She's like, you don't think about me when you make decisions. And I'm just like, oh, that's probably not how marriage is supposed to work.
It was kind of a light bulb moment for me too, realizing that was how he actually thought.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have this figured out, but for me, it was like, oh, I'm supposed to think about how this affects my wife, not just what I want right now.
Yeah. No, I think sometimes maybe have it figured out, but not always. There's always those selfish tendencies within you. Like, I don't know, I want to get coffee, but I won't think about getting her coffee, maybe. I mean, there's definitely worse. No, there's definitely worse things that I've done for sure, but that's like an immediate.
Well, yeah, and it
silly
starts out on a small scale. The selfish desires that kind of build up into, okay, I really didn't realize this big decision also would affect you because these little decisions didn't seem to have that ripple effect, And I think that's important, especially we talk about it in a different small group. Well, in this small group, but from a different video, that it's wise for us to take this advice that look in your heart, really evaluate your heart now. Like, am I struggling with obedience? Am I struggling with trust? Am I struggling with selfishness right now, even on a small scale, so that it doesn't add up from hearing these testimonies? It's not like, oh, I probably won't struggle with addiction or pornography or whatever that can be hidden. But so like, I don't really struggle with that. So I cannot relate to you. Like, you can still relate in a small scale. It doesn't have to be addiction to drugs. It doesn't even really have to be this like outward sin. It could be a heart condition that adds up and eventually does, need repentance. And I think that I would love to talk about with you guys, because I know eventually it got really public. And so there was that, part of your story that was like public humiliation. And although that's like really tough and no one really wants to go through their struggles with everyone's judgment, I think what I got out of that when we were talking is just how that kind of mirrors repentance, although that wasn't you like putting out in the paper, these are what we're dealing with and this is what's going on in our marriage. That was very public. But how repentance, when we are like, when something's out in the open and in the light and it's not hidden anymore and you can't hide it anymore, how the Lord can really use that and it's not stuck in the darkness where the enemy wants to continue trying to make his own little storm of it.
It was freeing for him. Me.
Not so much.
Right. Like, you could have probably gone without that, but
I could have, but what it has allowed him to do, with speaking and being out there in public. I mean, he gets calls, if not weekly, every other week. Could you speak at this event? Could you tell your story? or just from people.
And will Barb come?
And-
That's
yeah.
really what they want. Will you come and bring your wife?
No, but I mean, it's having it out there already made it easy for him to.
It's accountability.
Absolutely.
That helps him too.
I just want to go back to that secrecy idea. This was my problem. As long as nobody knew, that I could get away with it, right? And as long as Barb didn't know, what's it going to hurt her, you know? And a lot of us go into marriage thinking that like marriage will straighten us out, but then we carry whatever, you know, destructive habit into marriage that we have, and it doesn't go away. It's not gone. Oh, marriage didn't suddenly fix this problem, what? You know? And so, I think like you mentioned pornography. I think that's I'll be fine once I get married, right? I'll stop. And then we carry those secrets into our marriage, and those are the kinds of things that just destroy a marriage when you keep those secrets, you know, from each other, and then later it comes out. That's a trust killer. That's a super common thing for guys, much more common than my drug addiction. You know,
Mm-hmm.
as far as the, you know, the public humiliation. Yeah, I mean that was horrible. It wasn't like, you know, she said it was, you know, it was liberating for me, but that's not how I saw it at the moment, right? And at the moment, it was just like, oh. No, you know, one more blow, you know, and at that point, I was in that mode where I was beginning to think about how this had affected her, right? And so it's just like, oh, this
I
is
canceled
horrible.
our newspaper subscription.
Right? Yeah.
I
So,
did too.
Sorry, West Central.
yeah. Oh, it was, yeah, and you know, I mean, there's that part of me that like, oh, it's the newspaper's fault, you know, it's like,
Right.
oh, those people, well, how could they do this to me? But I mean, you pretty quickly realize they didn't. Nobody did this to me, but me, you know.
Mm-hmm. So you guys grew up in a church, your parents were pastors. And so you've grown up hearing forgiveness as this like almost instantaneous thing that you have to do to someone. You have to forgive them because Jesus has forgiven you. What was that like for you to have to go through something that isn't easily forgiven, and yet your whole life that's what you've been told is 70 times 7, or forgive those who trespass against you, you know, so that as God has forgiven you. What was that like?
It was hard, and church was kind of the last place I wanted to be because people I didn't even really know would say, well, you have to forgive, you know, or make other comments
It's that simple.
just weren't helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in the long run, it's made me a lot less judgmental with other people because I know what a process it is. And it's not as easy as just saying, yeah, I forgive you, and moving on and pretending nothing happened. I mean, there was a huge mess that had to be addressed and figure out how to live moving forward, and not just live, but thrive, and for our kids to see that.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a process. And there were days I just had to say, God, you have to do this through me because I can't do it on my own. And you do realize that it's a supernatural thing. Forgiveness is not something that is natural
Right.
to humans.
It's not in our own strength.
No. And I guess I didn't really get that before. So I would say I would not have been able to forgive him on my own strength.
I think it was important. You mentioned this the other night, but you did mention it now too. Of we're not supposed to just forgive and forget, because then you can fall into the same patterns. And then in your book, it said what forgiveness can lead you to. This the liberations, you know, just not to keep the record of wrongs. I think that's where, as Christians, especially growing up in the church, you know, when you said that, I was like, is it really not in the Bible? You know, and then I'm like, you know, it's the Lord forgives quickly and then doesn't keep a record of wrongs, because that's what it brings. You don't feel like you have to. You're not bearing the weight of like, well, you've done this, this, and this, and this, so you're going to do it again. I don't know exactly what your quote of your book said, but I think that's where it's misunderstood among Christians that grow up is, you know, we forgive and then we're able to not have to keep that record of wrongs, versus you're supposed to forgive and then forget.
Yeah. It's getting out of the debt collection business.
Yeah. There you go. That's good.
You know,
It's important.
yeah.
Even though it's kind of our, like, kind of want to do that because you feel justified in it.
I wanted him to suffer the way I had, you know, emotionally, and I think he suffered enough.
So what are some scriptures that you clung to?
Well, I read through the Psalms, especially if he was home. I would go up to my bedroom and shut the door because I didn't want to be around him. And I read through the Psalms, and I was telling you the other night in my Bible, by different verses, there's a little 2014. And so I was reading through that last night, and I'm like, I wonder why. Some of the verses, I was like, I wonder why I wrote that one down. But at the time, it really meant something. But, you know, Psalm 20, may the Lord answer you when you are in distress. Psalm 34, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 86, hear my prayer, O Lord. Listen to my cry for mercy. In the day of my trouble, I will call to you, for you will answer me. And then Psalm 103, but from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him. And just remembering that he was always there. And it was, you know, good for me too. Up until this point, life had been pretty easy. I'd been pretty self-sufficient. I didn't have to rely on God for anything. And I did in this situation.
Yeah.
So what was the road to forgiveness was, you know, reading the Psalms and trusting, relying on God. What was it like for you guys to rebuild that trust within your relationship? Because you went from hiding in your room to now sitting next to each other.
Now we like to hang out.
Yeah.
That's probably the most common question I get whenever I talk is people want to know what this, you know, that's like, what happened? How did you get there? Because your marriage was over. And I mean, we were living separate lives. We were living, and I was gone to treatment for a month, and that wasn't long enough, right? So I came back, and we're living under the same roof, but separate lives. I mean, I would leave for the day and stay out as long as I could and bring the kids home and then be home, but still living separate. And we did, to Barb's credit, she was willing to engage in counseling, and I wouldn't say the counselor was magic, but just the fact that we showed up at one spot once a week, we like drove separately, but came to this place, and just like for 1 hour a week, okay, we are going to work at this, and that was the beginning. And then on my side, I did realize, you know, that I had to live a different life. I mean, and that was. And in retrospect, understanding that Barb had to see that for a long time. And I mean, there's no magic number of days, but it was 18 months, I think, before she started to go, okay, I think he's not just doing this for show, because we do that sometimes, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to go to church and read my Bible every day and make sure it's out, that she sees it, that I've got my Bible out. But, you know, actually, I mean, this isn't about whether or not she sees me. This is about just me and God, and I've got to fix that first. You know, when I was in treatment, I wanted to get home. Like day one, I got there. When can I go home? I got to fix my life. And my counselor wisely said, you can't fix anything until you work on this. And so that for me, I had to work on it before I could work on this. And then I just had to give her time, which was hard for me because I'm not a patient person. So.
Yeah, it took a long time, and it's baby steps. It's not like one day it was like, hey, oh, you're back. Let's hang out, you know?
Yeah. Like today you can hold my hand.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. So.
Yeah. I mean, there were days, honestly, if she'd have thrown in the towel, I'd have been, oh, thank God, you know, we're done. It was tough times for a long time, and it was slow, and we both had to just keep working at it. There were setbacks, right? Like things would come up to remind you, and then the anger and hurt would all come back, you know, and then be like, okay, we're back at square one again. All right. You know, it took time, but both working at it. I think both realizing that we're not quitting, and just keep working at it.
And he's around a lot, so I don't have any option other than to hang out with him, you know. So I figured,
like now or back then, you mean?
I might as well enjoy it if this is the way it's going to be.
He's just here all the time.
He's just never gone.
He's not that bad.
He's a lot of fun, actually. But he started asking, what do you want to do? Why don't we go grocery shopping together? You know, things that in the past, if it wasn't something he wanted to do, he wasn't going to do it, you know. So he has stopped asking me to join CrossFit.
I'll keep asking.
It's okay. I'm never going to. And he knows that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but in the past, that would have been, well, if we want to hang out, you might as well do CrossFit with me.
Yeah.
Is that fair? You wanted to do triathlons together, so I did. You want, things like that.
CrossFit came after recovery, so
Yeah.
I would say I've never pushed CrossFit.
No,
on you,
I'm
but-
just saying in the past
But
you
yeah,
would
totally
have.
true. Yeah. I mean, I always said I want to do what I want to do because my stuff is fun and yours is not.
Yeah. You would
my.
literally say that though.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Kind of joking, but kind of not.
I had a question, but I am now spacing on what it was. Oh, we talked about this at dinner. You would have people in your life that would tell you, for lack of sensitivity, like God is doing this to you.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
At the time, it was so offensive because I felt like God was all I had to cling to. And if he was the responsible party, then I had nothing, and I feel like it absolves people from taking personal responsibility, that viewpoint. And it's not biblical. God does not tempt anyone, nor can he be tempted by evil. Scott did this.
Yeah.
And so I would get pretty offended when people would say that to me. I think the whole experience too just taught me maybe what not to say to people in certain situations. I had a lot of people who wanted to get together for coffee who I'd never had coffee with before. And it was just like, that's not helpful. They just kind of wanted more information
Yeah.
about what was going on. And I think some people, had really good intentions and a good heart, but at the time I couldn't see that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard to know who was and who wasn't.
Yeah. So just, it's just kind of taught me people don't need advice from me. All they need to know is I am not standing here in judgment. I'm praying for you. And
Yeah. What were some helpful things people said?
well, I told you guys the other night, I got a card from Liz's mom, and all it said was, I don't know what happened. I don't need to know what happened, but there are no stones in these hands. And I just remember breaking down and crying because I felt like there were a lot of stones in a lot of people's hands.
Right.
People saying, I can't believe you didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe you just let that go on. And, it's not our place ever to judge anybody else. So,
Yet you still were willing to give this whole situation up to God. So he was able to turn it for good. Other than a stronger relationship, what would you say are some of the outcomes of the whole situation outside of that?
I think our marriage is much more honest, probably stronger because of it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend going through
Absolutely not.
something like that to get a stronger marriage, but
Here's what you do: you go out and you get yourself addicted, and everything gets better. No, yeah, I absolutely. We talked about this. It's God can take terrible things and use them for good. In my mind, I can say I'm at the point where I can say I'm thankful for my addiction because I'm thankful of who I am now. I'm always hesitant to talk about it that way with Barb because she was the one that was most hurt by it. But to say we're way better. We have a way better marriage. We're both way better people for having gone through it. Again, not recommending it. But
well,
at
you
the
sure
same
are.
time- You couldn't be much worse, is that what you're saying?
It's probably true.
I would say we're both better.
And we have a far better marriage. I do think, you have a much different perspective. We both do, of other people's struggles too now. I mean, when other people are going through things, our perspective and our willingness to not be judgmental, but to reach out a hand. I would say you doing this is, something that you would never have done prior to,
It makes you realize too, though, there has to be personal responsibility. God wasn't going to work through me in forgiveness if I wasn't willing to do what it took to get to that point.
Right.
I had to surrender.
You could have chosen a different path.
Yeah.
Story
But-
could have turned out very different.
There was personal responsibility on his part too, owning up to what he did and making some pretty significant changes. So I think our society today has kind of shifted away from some of that personal responsibility. You know, we all make choices. What are the choices you're making? And are you, even if it's hard choices, is that what you need to be doing? You know, the hard choice was not ripping into him when I really wanted to, because it made me feel better in the moment.
Yeah.
But
So good in the moment.
it really is.
Sometimes.
And sometimes I did. But I also learned that that's not healthy.
Because we're probably all going to offend someone at some point. It's kind of inevitable, right? Like I can laugh and it would offend somebody. But it's just understanding, like, from that moment when I've offended, what am I going to do? Am I going to change? Am I going to hide my head in the sand, or am I going to keep repeating the same offense over and over again? But yeah, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I keep thinking of, because you shared something you listened to. I listened to it, like, I think it was a 2-part sermon by Upper Room, and it was titled Bite, Devour, and Consume. And it talked a lot about conflict, and especially in the church. And he gave the analogy, a couple different analogies, but one just kind of any conflict, how, you know, when someone hurts somebody, whether you are the one hurting or you're the one getting hurt, the one who's hurting is taking a bite out of that person's flesh. And then that open wound is kind of where we want to react out of. Just like really bloody and messy, and you're hurt. And so obviously you should be able to, you know, react out of that. And the person who did the bite could sit there and chew on that. You know, sounds gory, but, you know, chew on it by like making things worse, continue in their own habit, you know, that kind of thing. And the part of being hurt and having this big wound that's open and has to heal with time. I mean, you see that in our physical bodies, that we either need the Lord to touch us and have an immediate miracle to be healed from something, or he created us to, you know, have our bodies heal with time and with interventions and things like that. So he talked about how us as Christians, we can sit and chew on it ourselves, or act in the flesh and react in the flesh, or act in the spirit and deny our flesh, and in the forgiveness. And for me, I think that just spoke a lot of volumes, because I think my flesh would want to, like, I'm an outward processor. I need to talk about it. I need to, you know, and that can, you know, become kind of my own chewing, that I could immediately take a bite out of them because they took a bite out of me, or vice versa, you know. And it really you have to just deny your flesh. And I think that's really an important thing to focus in on as the story of your guys' forgiveness, is that you really couldn't do it on your own. All that big wound, all you wanted to do was throw it back in his face and show him what he did to you, and make him hurt
I
like
did for quite a while.
And you realized it wasn't doing anything.
Well,
You
it
know?
was just wrecking me
Right.
too.
Yeah. So I think that's important. I think it's a beautiful picture to just then tie in where the Lord came in, and then how he redeemed this whole situation, not only for Scott's addiction, but for your marriage and for personal bitterness and anger that you struggled with. I just think that's really beautiful. So I don't know if that whole gory picture makes sense, but it does in my head.
Cannibals.
Yeah.
Christians are cannibals.
It's been like 3 years since I've listened to it too, but every time I think of a conflict, I'm like, where's my wound and how am I reacting? So
Our wound is right here. I'm the cause of all your stress. Just kidding.
it's not true.
Do you guys have anything else that you'd like to share in wrapping up here? So much wisdom in those 49 years over there.
I know. I love it.
49. Yeah. I mean, work at honesty, openness. Trust takes time to build, and forgiveness does not mean things just go back to normal. Sometimes you have to create boundaries. I think if I'd have kept bringing, as the kids grew up, if I kept bringing drugs into the home, I think she could forgive with making very concrete separation and boundaries.
Right.
And then, if you want a good marriage, you got to work at it. And I think we do, spend time together, work at being open, being honest, work on yourself, be the person you need to be with Christ. And then by nature, you'll be a much better person for each other.
I agree with that.
That's awesome. And I feel like all that is applicable to not just marriage, relationships in general. Because, I'm sure you've had people hurt you. And maybe in that situation, you really found out who your real friends were and stuff and had to forgive others as well. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing, you guys. I'm sure there's so much more that we could have shared about or gone into, but
Next time.
next Mother's Day.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, we'll let you guys go into your small groups. Have a great night. We love you, and we will see you next week.